I'm going to show you the process of just lowering an exhaust and the fight with the hangers without using a specialist tool. So I needed to drop my exhaust down to get at the underside of the handbrake on my car. But obviously there are other reasons you'd want to do this, to do with the exhaust itself as well, maybe. To be clear, I'm talking about just temporarily dropping the exhaust from the header back, not actually removing any components in this video. So exhausts are just suspended under cars on these rubber hangers, 6 or 7 on my Ford with a single exhaust system, and they simply pull off, but they're a real bear to work. You can get specialist pliers like these, but that's another damn tool to buy and store somewhere, and what's life without a challenge? I'll place links to these tools below for you if you disagree, but I'll show you anyway how to do it with the tools that you're likely to have on hand. So you definitely need some lubricant, and it wants to be something that won't damage the rubber. This silicone grease is ideal. This CRC type is quite liquid, it's not very viscous, which aids in penetrating into the hole while the hanger is still on the exhaust, which is kind of helpful. You could also use a Ptfe or Teflon type, but you should avoid petroleum products because of the potential damage to the rubber. And you'll want some pliers. So you need to take each hanger and coat the rod end with grease, and try to push some of the grease into the hole in the rubber as much as you can. And then get your pliers, and here's where the needle noses are useful, because you can just jam them into the rubber hole so as to get a grip on the rubber from the bottom as shown. Maybe lift the exhaust a little if it helps to take some weight off it, and then you just grip as hard as you can and try to pull it off. Now you need to work the rim of the hole in the rubber around the stop on the rod. So once it's over the rim, it'll become much easier, and then finally it'll pop off without much resistance. And then after that, you just need to repeat that process with all the hangers. Make sure you don't miss any, as sometimes they're a little hidden. If you're looking under a car, especially that's just up on jack stands, it can be easier to miss one. And by the way, what I'm doing here is disconnecting all the hangers except the rearmost one at the muffler, as otherwise you'll be increasing the leverage on the remaining hangers as you do them, if you see what I mean. So leave the muffler for last. One other point, find your downstream O2 sensor, or sensors plural, on a multibank or a V engine, and take a look at their cables. You will need enough slack in them to allow the exhaust to drop away. Otherwise you'll damage a sensor or a cable. So in my case it's enough here to just unhook the cable from its little sort of bracket, little grommet on the heat shield. And this shown here is a fairly central hanger on my system, and I had the idea to add some support to the middle of the exhaust as I lowered it, so that it wasn't wanting to bend under its own weight. So I hooked up this elastic to do that, although in retrospect I don't think it was necessary. So long as you're careful and you don't drop it or subject it to some kind of shock, the exhaust is basically rigid enough to take care of itself. But you know, this might be a helpful thing to do if you want. Okay, so then finally, lastly, do the muffler one. Remember, all the exhaust weight is now on this single hanger, so it will be a little bit more difficult, and you may need to lift the exhaust to take the force off of the hanger. And then once it's free, you can carefully lower it down. The flex pipe at the front below the header will allow the whole thing to articulate down. Just keep an eye on the O2 sensor cable or cables, as I mentioned. And also you can see here that the elastic is taking up a little bit and providing some midsection support, although it's not very useful, to be honest. And maybe have a bit of carpet or something to place the muffler onto to avoid damaging it. Alright, now you have access above the exhaust or to the header back components on the exhaust itself that you might want to work on. And then after all that, putting it all back together is just a simple reversal of what I've talked about so far, and much easier, fortunately. You can use more silicone grease to guarantee things, but the rubber hangers go back on far easier just by hand than they came off. So lift it up and do the muffler end first again, then work your way back along and do the rest of the hangers. Don't forget any. It's probably a good idea to know how many there were and then tick them off one by one. And then finally sort out the O2 sensor cables. And then that's it. When you next start the engine, just have a quick listen to it from the back of the car. If you think there's any chance that you did any damage, like if you drop the exhaust or if you've holed or cracked something, it'll sound different. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Have fun.